Hello, my name is Anna Baverstock and I'm a community paediatrician. I've made this video on behalf of the Wellbeing team for all colleagues at Somerset Foundation Trust. At any point you can hit pause on the video if you want to study one of the visuals or spend a bit of time thinking about what I've covered. At the end you will find the Wellbeing team's email address and also details of how to find us on the intranet. What I wanted to focus on today was wellbeing at work, and I thought it was really useful to try a new thing for me, which is to try and record it rather than me trying to whiz around and deliver this session individually. We're recording this in early May. We've been talking and thinking about coronavirus here for around the last 6-7 weeks, and I just wanted to reflect back how busy that time has been for us all and how much of a period of change it has been. And what I really wanted to do was to focus on this session about thinking about how we maintain our well-being at work with all the changes that are going on and with all the continued anticipatory anxiety about what may come next. I think the first thing about saying about well-being at work is that there is no size fits all. Clearly I really like trees, I like poetry and I like art, and I'm aware that many of my colleagues see some of my well-being trees and immediately want to grab a chainsaw. My aim in this really short film is that to try and give each of the 10,000 or so colleagues across Somerset Foundation Trust a few little bits to take away. But I appreciate that not everything is going to land with everyone. And if you've watched the entire thing and don't feel that anything has landed with you, I'd be really grateful if you could give me some feedback. The take-home message is it's okay to not be okay. We are all experiencing something that none of us have ever experienced before. And I think that what I have seen very much is a real coming together of teams, are talking about it and acknowledging that it's difficult. Some of you are working on the acute trust, some of you are very much in more of a frontline role in terms of clinical or non-clinical. Some of you are having to isolate at home and having to distance at home, and we're all having to learn new ways of communication. I have found certain aspects of it really challenging, and I know that some of you are as well. So it's okay to not be okay, and part of the message I want to deliver is to make sure that you all know who to seek help from. So the next thing to say is I've been drawing a lot of triangles recently. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a well-described hierarchy of needs in terms of what we all need in our everyday life in order to be able to fulfil a successful professional and personal life. And it could not be more apt during the current climate. There are two triangles on this slide. The one that I've hand-drawn is my attempt to think about, in framing wellbeing, what we very much wanted to do as a wellbeing team was to try and take away as much of the unnecessary worries from you so that you could all focus on the individual bit of magic that you bring, which is your non-clinical or clinical role that you do the best. So by talking about this, it's layering it up. So at the very bottom, it's the fundamental needs in terms of food, drink, accommodation, thinking about the environments that we work in, which are changing the whole time. Layering on sleep and breaks, needing to take a break, thinking about communication, thinking about how we work as teams, thinking about our behaviour during that. And it's only once you get all of those fundamental things right that we can then start talking about the really important psychological support that we clearly will need to offer. Not everyone will necessarily need it. The important thing about wellbeing is that we need to have the broad offer, and that you need to know that if you're not okay, who to go to for support and what sort of support you need. If you've been on Musgrave or you're on Twitter, you may well have seen my battery slides before. The important thing about this slide is that you're very welcome to study the detail, but the take-home message is, in order to deliver high quality, safe, compassionate care, we need to be functioning in the green zone. This is where our batteries are charged at home and at work as much as possible in order for us to be able to have that kind conversation, hold that hand and listen to our colleague or our patient in difficulty. The important thing about the battery is that we're able to recharge at home, yes, but we also need to be able to recharge at work in order to enable the first patient of the shift, the last patient of the shift, to have high quality, compassionate care. I've been researching and studying burnout for a number of years, and a Twitter friend of mine, Simon Fleming, came up with a really brilliant duck score. It's not a validated tool, it's a 1 to 9 score, but I think it's a really useful analogy to think of in terms of what your range is. We're all really good at plugging in our phone when the phone reaches the red. How good are we at recognising in ourselves that actually we've hit the red and we need to recharge? So perhaps having a think about what you might use as an analogy. If you find the duck score helpful, I'm sure Simon would be delighted. But there are lots of analogies used at the moment, and I think that my favourite one in the first few weeks was, Anna, you've got to recognise this is a marathon, not a sprint. Well, I'm really sorry to disappoint you. Yes, even all of you who wear more lycra than me, are much younger than me and much more capable of running a marathon than me, none of us are going to be able to do this as a marathon. We are all going to have times when we have a break. And a really brilliant analogy came up, again through a conversation on Twitter, from Shahina Braganza in the Gold Coast, who talked about it being a relay. But a relay for me, again, involves more of a sprint mentality. And so how about we combine the two and call it a marathon relay? Then we take our stint on our shift, but we all also are able to hand the baton down over or hand it down. And again, using a visual analogy, on the slide you'll see, and you may well know, so Geraint Thomas is a Tour de France winner when Team Sky was Team Sky. He, as part of the Tour de France with his team, I think is a really useful analogy to use. So as a team of cyclists, I want you to think of yourself in your clinical teams as part of that cycling team. Team Sky do not cycle 24/7 a day for 21 days of Tour de France. They do their shift, during the shift they're looked after from the team car and the team bus, and then at the end of their shift they go back to the team bus and the hotel where they're looked after. Now, we've worked really hard as a Wellbeing team with our amazing colleagues around the Trust to try and create our own team bus in terms of the Wellbeing hubs, the Wellbeing zones, the food, the coffee and the environment that we're providing for you. And I think that's the really important thing that's going to continue to sustain us through the next months and into the future as we go through this next part of what coronavirus looks like for us. We clearly, as part of that team, are all going to have times where some of us are feeling a bit better and some of us are finding things a little bit harder. Again, using the analogy of the relay, at times we may need to hand the baton over to someone else. If you get physical symptoms, you need to be able to take some time off. If you're psychologically having a difficult time, you need to be able to take a bit of a break, see if you can address those needs, and then get back on and do your shift. It could not be more important. The only way we're going to sustain all of this together is by picking up the baton, taking our shift, but knowing when to put it down. So wellbeing at home, wellbeing at work. The real challenge is that wellbeing at home looks very different for lots of us. Some of us are working at home for the first time. Some of us are spending much more time at home than we're used to. And some of us can't do the wellbeing at home activities that we would normally like to do. On the slide there's some of mine. Clearly my camping holiday in France is not going to be happening this summer, but some of those activities I am going to be able to do. The challenge with some of our home charges is that we can't do them in the same way. So again, we need to sometimes think about some different ways to continue to connect socially, to continue to do some of the physical activities, but in a way that we're able to continue with. There's some very specific challenges, I think, around being at home, and that is the ability to be able to disconnect and switch off from the 24-hour news feed on social media and the television. And I certainly have found that it's actually really important to have times where I'm not constantly being updated by what's happening either locally or more globally. I think as well we have to think about different ways that we're connecting with family and friends who perhaps aren't working in the NHS and are working in a different way. The important thing is to concentrate the energies on those most important to you at home, and perhaps think a little bit about how you might then spend that time. We need to have well-being when we're not at work and well-being when we are at work. I can't give sleep as much attention as I want to in this, but there is a reason we meant to sleep between 6 and 8 hours a night or a day if we're on nights. There's a lot of really fabulous resource around. What I would say is that we're all probably having a bit more difficulty with sleeping because of the thoughts that we're having. We need to really look at making sleep hygiene a real priority in order to, again, sustain us. As Mike Farquhar says, sleep is our superpower. So thinking about well-being at work, again using the battery analogy, we drain our battery and we charge it up. So how can we think about that? The first thing to say is to be aware of your battery level. As I said before, we know when our phone's going into the red. How do we recognise when we're going into the red? So think halt. Are you hungry, angry, late or lonely or tired? If you are, how can you take a break? How can we empower everyone to take a break? How can we facilitate, if we're in more of a lead role, others to take a break? It could not be more important. Again, there's lots of information and posters and resources available. We need to think about food and drink, and hopefully we've now made that a bit easier to access, and we need to make sure that we take it regularly. I'm hoping that by now you will have seen some information around colleague wellbeing in the daily update emails, on the Monday Trust communications via Twitter, Facebook or whatever social media you use, all by searching on the intranet. The really important thing is that once we've got the base of the triangle right, is that there is lots of psychological support available if you need it and at the point that you need it. If I can just highlight two things, there's the personal resilience plan for coronavirus, which I would utterly recommend if you haven't already done. Again, it's printed off, or you can print it off via the intranet. And then there are a variety of different posters which are really, really helpful. I would hope that everyone now has this in whatever little wellbeing hub you have where you are. If not, please be the person to print it off and create the resource. I just wanted to briefly mention around civility saves lives. I'm clearly a passionate communicator, and I'm also really passionate about how we engage in civil conversations and try and be kind through this. I think we have to remember that we're all humans and no one is unaffected by coronavirus. On a different day, we don't know what other people are going through, and I think it's really important to remember that. There's really good evidence that if you are rude to a colleague, or if a colleague is rude to you, it'll have an impact not only on your performance and on behaviour, but also on everyone around you. So I think we do need to bear that in mind. I think it's a time just to highlight the triangle again. What does our new work look like? I think we're in early May in the period of the next phase of change, as we start thinking about how we might get forward through the next few months in a more sustainable way. And again, for many of us who feel like all we've done is change, yet another change can be really challenging. So it's sometimes quite a good time to think about, actually, have I got my wellbeing in place? Do I need some psychological support before then embarking on the next change that we may need to have, which may be needed over a more sustained period of time. Just to finish with, because I'm sure you're all fed up of hearing my voice by now, I wanted to just highlight a couple of short mindful activities that everyone can do. I don't know about you, I'm washing my hands much more than ever. And what I really have always been keen on is a mindful hand wash. The beauty of a mindful hand wash is it's probably better from the infection control point of view. It certainly doesn't take any longer, but what it does enable us to do is, instead of worrying about what's just happened or worrying about what's going to happen, it enables us to just connect in that moment, feel the warm water on your hands, smell the delicious NHS soap, and then really give your hands a good wash and then dry them and go on you go with your day. The really important thing is that as you wash your hands more, you have the benefit to check in and just be in that moment ever so much more. What I want us to do now is to all take a mindful breath together. It's fine if you don't want to. All you need to do is just hold your breath until I finish the exercise, and then we can all just breathe normally. So it's called a square or strategy breath. I'm now going to talk you through a square breath or a mindful strategy breath. In order to get the maximum benefit, I suggest you sit or stand up straight, uncross your legs, and have your feet firmly placed on the floor if you are able. Together, we're going to take a deep breath in, 2, 3, 4. Hold the breath for 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. And hold, 2, 3, 4. Now, I've certainly found that quite relaxing, and I'm probably ready to take a few more. So by all means, press pause and take a few more yourself. If you didn't want to join in, you are able to breathe now. So I hope you feel better having taken that square breath. I find that often I need to take 2 or 3 in order to just feel my shoulders come away from my ears and to feel that little bit more relaxed. And I would utterly recommend that you practice that whenever you want. I find it really helpful, particularly if I'm feeling a bit stressed, feeling a bit angry, feeling a bit tired, and needing to just check in with myself before having an important conversation or before perhaps sending an email or picking up the phone. I hope that you recognise now it's okay to not be okay. So I'm going to ask you a question. Are you okay? Now, clearly you can't answer that, but perhaps you can have that conversation with yourself. And if the answer is not really, then perhaps go and find a colleague, a family member, a friend to have a quick conversation with. And then if you need it or you want to, then please do pick up the phone and access some of the psychological support that is available. It truly is okay to not be okay. I just wanted to finish with a few quotes. So the pile of stones for me is really symbolic, because I think at times we feel as individuals like we're the largest stone and we're lying down trying to prop up the weight of the world on our shoulders. But actually we all work as part of a team, and the strength of the team is each individual member of the team. The strength of each member is the team. And that there's a famous African proverb, and it could not be more true. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The beauty about having to go through something like this as a team within the NHS is that we have lots of people to go together with. I thought I would leave the final few words to someone more eloquent than me, and I got this beautiful book for Christmas by Charlie Maxey called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, and I'm sure many of you have seen it. Charlie's been particularly good at doing some bespoke ones for the NHS. Everyone is a bit scared, said the horse, but we are less scared together. Tears fall for a reason, and they are your strength, not weakness. What's the bravest thing you've ever said? Asked the boy. Help, said the horse. When have you been at your strongest? Asked the boy. When I have dared to show my weakness. Asking for help isn't giving up, said the horse. It's refusing to give up.